If you're running finance for a not-for-profit organization, you need to account for all kinds of revenue sources, whether it's admissions, memberships, donations, sales. And a lot of times, the funding source might be restricted in its purposes. Maybe a grant, or maybe something like a capital campaign. In any case, when the revenue is restricted in its use, we need to report those revenues separately in the financial statements, right? Let's say we get some grant revenue and it's for a restricted purpose. So we got this grant revenue and we're going to tag it as restricted grant revenue. So it goes in the restricted column in our financial statements. And then we're going to spend some money. And some of that money that we're spending out of our unrestricted fund is qualified. So it's qualified grant expenses. So now we've satisfied some of the restriction on that grant by spending some of that money. So the last piece of the puzzle then is to release that restricted revenue into unrestricted as the spending restriction has been satisfied. That can be kind of tedious if you have a whole lot of grants. So let's take a look at how Sage Intacct can help not-for-profit accountants stay on top of that process. So let's take a look at a dashboard here for a nonprofit. You can see this is the grant manager's dashboard. We have a few different grants going on, but I want to focus on this restrictions and releases grant or graph right here. We take a look at this Travis County contract right in the middle. Now this is as of November 30, 2021. So you can see when I hover over it, we have $95,000 in restricted revenue that we've received. We have incurred $29,000 of qualified expenditures so far, and we have released $29,000 from restricted revenue into unrestricted that goes along with those qualified expenses. So taking a look at it in a financial statement format, you can see here the 95, the 29 moving from restricted over to unrestricted, and there's our $29,000 in the qualified expenditures that go along with that. Okay, on a organizational basis, because the satisfaction of restrictions account is all one line, it nets out to zero on an organizational basis. It only really matters at the restricted level, and most importantly, it frees up those restricted funds so that you can see and use that in your unrestricted operating funds. So what happens when we update this dashboard to 12/31/21? I'm going to just refresh everything here. So now if we take a look at that same restriction release graph, you can see on the Travis County contract that the restricted revenue is up to $150,000 now, and our expenditures are up to $86,000 at the end of December, but our cumulative release from restriction amount is still at $29,000. So we have some catching up to do here to get that release from restrictions to match the qualified expenditures that came out of the unrestricted fund. So to do that, I'm going to jump over to another tab here in the same company. This is the GL restriction release tab, and we just have a few parameters that we set and can update here in order to automate that restriction release. For one thing, we're going to do this as of 12/31/21. We use a release journal. You can name any journal you want in your GL to use here, but we use the release journal, or we added this so that we can see clearly which are the release entries when we're looking through our GL detail. Again, it's all washing through this one account, the 4,900 satisfaction of restrictions in this case, and we're just moving it from temporarily restricted over to unrestricted. So that part's pretty straightforward, as is this. The qualified expense, we're looking for those expenses that are in the current month. In the accrual book, we can use other books. If we had an allocation book, for instance, we could include that here. And then we are picking an account group that contains the expenses we want. In this case, I'm just going to capture anything that's a program expense. I might have a particular group of accounts that I wanted to include in this for some grants. Then I can make a custom account group that I would use in this case. So the key thing here is that we're basing all those expenses on anything that's tagged with this 402 Travis County contract in the project dimension. So when we generate this restriction release, Sage Intacct is going to go through our expenditures within that group and look for that tag and generate a restriction release to match. So let's see how that works. I'm going to just hit generate there. It's going to take me to the release log. So you can walk through, you can see any of the releases you've done. Right now, this particular release that we requested is in queue. These restriction release processes are all running on a background server. They do not run in the front of your production server. They don't slow it down or in any way interfere with your work. But if we just go ahead and refresh this, we'll see that restriction release has passed, and now we can drill straight to the journal entry that was created. Within this journal entry, you can see that we have separate lines for the different GL accounts where the expenditures were incurred. And then you can see that we're releasing this money from temporarily restricted, that's the debit, and then the credits going to unrestricted. Again, all within that one account, 4,900. Beyond this journal entry, we also can click on the restriction release description here, and that will take us to a snapshot of those parameters that we just used to create this restriction release. Want a little more detail? The qualified expenses that were used in that calculation can be dropped into an Excel workbook just like that. And let me pull this over to where you can see it. Now we have the specific expenditures by account, including the vendor and the amount. And there's our audit trail and backup for this restriction release. If we go back now to our dashboard, let's refresh the restriction release graph. And now you can see that our release from restriction amount is also 86,000. So we have caught up releasing our restrictions for the qualified expenditures. And we can also see when we refresh our report here that $86,000 now offsetting the expenditures that we incurred on that unrestricted and freeing up that money into our operating funds. Thanks again for attending. Please watch our other videos in the Sensiba San Filippo YouTube channel, and have a great day.